There is a governmental organization called the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And I'm going to talk about why they're in the news recently, but let me help you understand what this group does and why it's actually like, I'm glad the US government has this group. Basically, the USCIRF, International Religious Freedom Group, it includes like 9 members. They are appointed by leaders in both parties, both major parties. And basically, their job is to weigh in on religious freedom around the world. They have their staff kind of put together these reports saying, hey, there is this country that is really horrible on religious freedom. And if the United States cares about religious freedom, because we say we do, we should use that as leverage to get other countries to do what we want on this issue. We do the same thing with democracy, by the way. Like, the US cares about open and free democracy. So when you have a competent president and government, they can say, oh, hey, country that we're negotiating with on this issue, we want to do a deal with you on this, but also your human rights abuses are awful. And so we're not going to do this with you unless you do the human rights, unless you support democracy. And if you don't do that, we're not going to negotiate with you at all. And so we are trying to do the same thing with religious freedom. So in countries where you have to be in the majority religion, or you could be executed in some places, that seems like the sort of thing the United States ought to consider when dealing with other leaders, other global leaders, right? So I'll show you what I mean by this. This is an example of this year. The USCIRF, they put out a giant annual report. They do it every year. That's why it's annual. But like, look at this map. And what they're saying here is these red countries are countries of particular concern. And I'll zoom in here. They are saying that these countries in particular are the ones that have the least religious freedom. And I don't think there's any nation on this list that should surprise any of you. But like it's saying, China, if you are if you're religious in China, they're going to come after you. If you're not Muslim in Iran or Saudi Arabia, you blaspheme or you criticize Allah, for example, they may come after you. And that's very disturbing. And we need to make sure Americans know that if they're traveling to those countries, we should use that as leverage if we're talking, negotiating with those countries, etc. So those are the red countries, and those are the ones that are particularly problematic. What about the orange countries? They're on their way there. That's the next level, the special watch list. And then there are groups that are particularly concerning as well. And again, none of those are all that surprising. But this report, by the way, is like well over 100 pages. It's really detailed about what's going on in those countries. I appreciate that there are people in the government who do that work. And to give you an example of what I mean, the United States State Department has an obligation to promote religious freedom and democracy around the world. And I made a video about this last year. A couple of years ago, under the Biden administration, they gave a $500,000 grant to a humanist group that was trying to help persecuted atheists. Where was it? In Bangladesh and Nepal, maybe, places like that. And that's a good thing. By the way, we also give grants to groups helping persecuted Christians and persecuted Muslims in countries where they can't practice their faith. That is good, and I'm glad the United States is doing it. And the reason I made a video about it a couple of years ago is because some Republicans are like, why is the US government spending taxpayer dollars to promote atheism? And that's not what the grant was about. That's not what they were doing. So Republicans lied about it. But in general, these are good programs to have. That's why I appreciate the USCIRF. It's good, right? So who's on this committee? Who are the public-facing figures running this committee? Like I said, both parties get to nominate people to it. The president's party gets to nominate more people than the other side, which that's not that surprising. But among other things, in recent years, the USCIRF condemned anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim bias. In fact, last year, they recommended signing on to a statement condemning persecution of atheist and non-practicing individuals. And because of that recommendation, the United States signed on to that letter. So good stuff. Now, here's where things started getting controversial. In 2018, guess who Mitch McConnell nominated, because he gets to make some picks as a leader of his party? He nominated a guy named Tony Perkins to be on the USCIRF. And this made news at the time because Tony Perkins is a horrible person. Tony Perkins is the most recognizable anti-LGBTQ activist in America. He has espoused the most extreme views of LGBTQ people and other vulnerable communities. The idea that Perkins would be making policy recommendations to an administration that is already anti-LGBTQ is dangerous and puts those people directly in harm's way. That was my concern too. The headline here: longtime gay rights opponent Tony Perkins named to U.S. Religious Freedom Panel. There was also another quotation here somewhere. Yeah, look at this. This is from the director of the Southern Poverty Law Center's Intelligence Project, which basically designates which groups are hate groups. She said, Perkins specializes in spreading false propaganda that demonizes the LGBT community and Muslims. His idea of religious freedom is having the freedom to discriminate against entire groups of people he doesn't like. His well-documented bigotry has no place in any government entity. By the way, if you're curious, if you Google Tony Perkins and Confederate flag, you'll definitely find a picture. So Mitch McConnell appointed Tony Perkins to this board. And it's like, why are we doing that? If we want to spread religious freedom, you don't put Tony Perkins on that board. That's just disturbing. And then guess what happened a year later? The USCIRF, the leaders of that group, voted to make Tony Perkins the chair of the organization. He is the titular head of the USCIRF in 2019. And when that happened, the people who actually defend religious freedom in this country, they were like, what the hell are we doing? This is from the Religion News Service. Tony Perkins is the wrong pick to lead religious freedom efforts. This is by Jack Moline in 2019, who used to be the president of Interfaith Alliance, which a group that actually fights for religious freedom. And look at what he said about Perkins. How can Perkins be trusted to stand against religious persecution at a time when people in this country and around the world are being killed because of their faith, while still working for an organization, the Family Research Council, that devalues the realities of persecution by continually asserting that evangelical Christians are under attack in this country? Like, if you think Christians in America are persecuted, why should anyone take you seriously when other groups actually are persecuted? Instead of accepting this twisted definition of religious freedom, Americans ought to see Tony Perkins for who he is, a right-wing figure who has dedicated his life to pushing for the legalization of discrimination, particularly against the LGBTQ community. Congress ought to reverse his appointment. Anything less is an affront to the Constitution, damaging the separation between religion and government at the expense of both. Wonderful words, strong words. I agree with all of them. By the way, a couple of years ago, I appeared on Fox News. I think you can, if you're on YouTube, you could search for this. So if you search for my name, and you search Tony Perkins' name, you will find us both on the same panel on Fox News. You could tell me later if you thought my appearance was any good there. But they announced this guy would be the head of the USCIRF. And the thought that went through my head at the time is, what's that actually going to mean for the work that they do? Because is it just going to be like 24/7, Christians are under attack everywhere, and then they just ignore actual persecution of every other group? Because I was worried that might happen, even though Tony Perkins was one voice out of 9. So maybe it's like the Supreme Court. He doesn't get more votes because he's the chair. He's just the guy on the letterhead, you know? I will say that in 2019, when he was chair, this is one of the press releases that the USCIRF put out. You may remember that there was a Saudi blogger named Raif Badawi who was punished and jailed because he allegedly blasphemed. And for years, this guy was in prison, and the Saudi government was, they were literally persecuting him, and there were all these campaigns to try to get this guy free. And the USCIRF called for his release. They said, you know, on charges of apostasy and insulting Islam. USCIRF has advocated for Saudi Arabia to release him since 2013 and has recommended that Congress and the administration continue to do the same in its 2019 annual report. So that's under Tony Perkins, USCIRF. I'm glad they did that. I will say, if you look at the statements here, you see a vice chair commented. You see another vice chair commented. You know whose name isn't in this press release? Tony Perkins. I don't know why that is. That's disturbing, though, that Tony Perkins wasn't involved in this. But I will say that even though all these people were concerned about Tony Perkins joining this organization, as far as I can tell, the group continued to do its work. And I do not recall hearing anything suggesting Tony Perkins pushed for his religion over other religions, or that there was anything weird happening with the USCIRF. Like, they just continued moving along as expected, which is great. Like, Tony Perkins kept saying a bunch of crazy stuff on Twitter and online and in his day job, but at least when working with the USCIRF, he seemed to be professional, which was a surprise to me. But there you go. So Tony Perkins was nominated to that committee. 2019, he becomes the chair. In 2020, he becomes the vice chair. And then for the next 2 years, he was just on the committee. And in 2022, he leaves that committee. So, like, all right, no harm, no foul, I guess. Okay. And in the time since then, there really hasn't been a lot of drama. Like, I know you hear a lot of crazy things about, like, who did Robert F. Kennedy Jr. appoint to the vaccine panel? And it's just a collection of crazy people. But when it comes to the USCIRF, you probably haven't heard about anything in the news because it just hasn't been controversial yet. Or at least Republicans haven't figured out that they could make it a thing. The only time I've heard any controversy is like a couple years ago. Maybe Chuck Schumer appointed someone named Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum to that committee, and she's a lesbian. And some Southern Baptist leaders were freaking out about that because, oh no, she's going to, I don't know, spread the gay or something. Now, why am I talking about all this? Because last year, there was an opening on this board, and Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, nominated this woman, Missouri anti-LGBTQ advocate Vicky Hartzler, appointed to U.S. Religious Freedom Agency. And this is 2024. And basically, Vicky Hartzler, who used to be a congresswoman from Missouri, she was appointed by Mike Johnson to join this group. So Tony Perkins was gone, but now they were appointing this other lady. Why is she bad? Well, I will tell you. She became famous before she was in Congress for opposing marriage equality in Missouri. She tried to get the state to pass a constitutional ban on gay marriage when that was still a thing people did, and it worked. She got it done. She has said that gay marriage is like polygamy and incest. She says gay couples do not deserve equal rights, just as it's not a right of a 3-year-old to drive a car, which, again, makes no sense and is just straight up bigotry. She later said, when a reporter called her out on that her comments were misconstrued, you guys. I didn't mean to say 3-year-old, even though that's what I said. She meant to say 13-year-old. So 13-year-olds shouldn't be allowed to drive. Gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married. See, she's totally sane. So once she got into Congress, the anti-gay bigotry stuff just continued. Remember Don't Ask, Don't Tell? And Democrats wanted to repeal that. And it did get repealed, and that allowed openly gay soldiers to serve in the military without punishment. Vicky Hartzler said, if we're going to do this, then the gay soldiers need to sleep separately from the straight ones. That's a thing she actually said. Because again, I think she thinks if you're gay, you're going to do bad stuff. So there was one other thing she did that I wanted to tell you. Oh, right. More than a decade later, you may remember after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, there is a belief that they're going to go after marriage equality next. And one of the ways to protect it is to get rid of the Defense of Marriage Act, which defines marriage as between a man and a woman. And even Republicans are like, yeah, this is not a battle we're going to win. Why don't we just let this one go? And Vicky Hartzler was like, no, we have to save the Defense of Marriage Act. And she gave a speech on the House floor. She was in tears, arguing that we need to make sure gay people still cannot get married in the year of our Lord, like 2021. And when she did that, it was funny because you know who spoke out against her? Her own nephew. This is amazing. Look at this headline right here. Nephew calls Republican who tearfully opposed gay marriage bill a homophobe. Look at this. In the video that he posted on like TikTok or something, I don't know where, Andrew Hartzler said his aunt was crying because gay people like me can get married. He added, so despite coming out to my aunt this past February, I guess she's still just as much as a homophobe. He also said, it's more like you want the power to force your religious beliefs onto everyone else. And because you don't have that power, you feel like you're being silenced. But you're not. You're just going to have to learn to coexist with all of us. And I'm sure it's not that hard. That's her own nephew speaking out against her. So this is Vicky Hartzler, just an anti-gay Christian bigot. And here's the thing, that bill that she was crying about, all it did is protect the rights of gay people. Didn't force her to accept it. Her church would not have to marry gay people, you know what I mean? But she just opposed it because she thinks her religion should dictate public policy. One other thing she did that I wanted to share with you is that the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, this is back in 2011, they had built like a $3.5 million chapel for Christians on base to use. But it wasn't a Christian chapel. It was kind of a universal, all the big religions can use this chapel. Muslims can use it. I think Jewish people could use it as well. $3.5 million. While they did that, the Air Force Academy also spent $80,000, not $3.5 million, $80,000 to build an outdoor space for druids and pagans and witches and Wiccans to practice their beliefs. Not that there were any on campus, or if there were very few, but they said, look, we know we're going to have to accommodate non-Christians and the non-religious people as well. So we want to create a space for that too. And they did. And again, that should not be controversial, because if you want people to come to the Air Force Academy, you want to give them space to practice their faith, whatever it is. What did Vicky Hartzler say about all this? She said it was crazy that we were spending any amount of money for fringe religions. In fact, she did an interview where she said all this. I'm going to play you a clip from this interview. Guess who she was talking to when she said this? Tony freaking Perkins.
But do you see this as a part of a growing trend that we see that there is really kind of a marginalization of Christianity and almost a promotion of other forms of, I would have to say, fringe religions?
I agree. I think so. And at the Air Force Academy recently, they weren't going to allow the Operation Christmas Child boxes there, too. And so I'm not sure what is going on there. But Christianity is the main religion in our country. And as a policy for the Department of Defense, I mean, we need to defend the practice of religion, but we do not have to obligate taxpayer funds to facilitate it or accommodate it or pay for it.
And what we've seen happen is there has been this effort to, as I mentioned a minute ago, to marginalize Christianity while promoting other religions, as if the government has to be the equalizer. And I want to ask you about that. I mean, as a congresswoman, as one who understands the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, is it the government's role to try to put all religions on the same plane?
No, it's not their role at all. I mean, their role is to facilitate basic policy for our country and to not to try to lift up one religion or over the other. They should be defending the basic rights that we have, the freedom of religion here, and certainly not facilitating or accommodating fringe religions. I mean, it's crazy.
Fringe religions. Again, they already built a $3.5 million facility for other religions to use. They spent a little bit of money for like pagans and Wiccans, and she's like, oh my God, we're promoting those religions over my religion. I think the weirdest part about that clip, though, is Tony Perkins saying, you're a congresswoman, so you must understand the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Like, have you seen Congress? Have you seen Republicans in Congress? They are the people who understand those things the least. So, by the way, since leaving Congress a couple of years ago, what has this woman done? She's still crazy. Just last year, she blasted schools that do like yoga and meditation and mindfulness in schools because she says those are based in Buddhism and Hinduism. And if schools really want to help kids who have mental health issues, they don't need meditation. They just need Jesus. That's what we need. So that's Vicky Hartzler. She's a conservative zealot who sees everything as Christian persecution, who cannot conceive of a country where other religions are treated with the same respect as her own. And that's the Vicky Hartzler who was appointed to the USCIRF to protect religious freedom around the world. And why am I talking about her now? Because this is the headline that appeared this week. Vicky Hartzler elected chair of bipartisan U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. They made her the chair of the group. What the hell are we doing here, people? It is hard to imagine a worse spokesperson for religious freedom around the world than a Christian zealot who has spent her career undermining religious freedom in the United States. Because whenever other people's beliefs have ever come into conflict with her own, she has used her power, including as a lawmaker, to push those other religions down. It's never enough to just say, I think they're wrong. She wants their faith, she wants her faith and only her faith to replace secular laws. She thinks neutrality is oppression. She thinks criticism of her personal beliefs are like a personal threat. Even in her bio on that page, it's weird. Look at this. She has a bio on the USCIRF page, and it's long, but look at this. It just talks about her resume promoting Christianity. She's been an advocate for those persecuted for their faith. Interesting. Who are we talking about here? Prior to her public service, she volunteered with the Voice of the Martyrs organization, providing tangible help to Christians persecuted for their faith. Like she says, look at my resume. I've always supported religious freedom. And then if you go down into the specifics, she's like, I help these Christians and these other Christians and more Christians. The only time in this bio she doesn't mention helping Christians is when she talks about Uyghurs who are in China, who are mostly Muslim and persecuted in China by the Chinese government. And why did she even bother to help or speak out on behalf of Uyghurs? Because the Chinese government was forcing them to have abortions. And the one thing she hates more than non-Christian religions is abortion. So that's the only time she defended any non-Christian organization. So that's Vicky Hartzler. She's now the head of the USCIRF. Again, I don't know how any other country can take our supposed support for religious freedom seriously when they could just point to her and her past statements as evidence for why they should impose their will on religious minorities. Like, how can she say with a straight face that other countries need to respect religious minorities and stop persecuting them when that's literally her entire career in the majority, right? Now, when she is one voice in a larger group, one of 9 members, her extremism wasn't front and center. I have not heard her name in association with this group over the past year since she got appointed. But now she's the head of the group. And I think she should explain why anyone should trust her in this role. Why should Jewish people, Muslims, atheists, why should they trust that she's going to do her job when nothing in her career has ever said she's going to defend their rights? Right? A Christian nationalist who has repeatedly dismissed and legislated against the wishes of non-Christians has no right telling other countries to respect religious minorities. Again, the silver lining is that I could say the same about Tony Perkins. And honestly, I don't remember Tony Perkins making news for ever doing anything bad within the USCIRF. I even asked a religion reporter who I trust, I'm like, do you recall any headlines about Tony Perkins running this group in like a bad way? And he couldn't think of anything either. The one comment I did get about Vicky Hartzler's appointment is from Nick Fish, who's the president of American Atheist, who, yes, he denounced that appointment and he denounced the fact that she's chair, but he did point out to me, in the 26-year history of the USCIRF, there has never been an atheist, humanist, or non-religious member of the commission, ignoring more than a quarter of Americans and nearly 2 billion people worldwide. Why are they putting so many Christian zealots on this group and not even bothering to put in non-religious leaders? And there are some who literally fight for religious freedom for all. It's unbelievable. So Right now, I should say there are 7 commissioners on the USCIRF. 2 more could be appointed, and those would be Donald Trump's appointments. And I don't know if anyone has brought this to his attention, and I don't know if he's just going to try to pull the Supreme Court and stack the place with right-wing zealots. I hope he doesn't. But we will see, because they'll turn anything into a culture war these days. But it would be disappointing, because the USCIRF does good work, did good work, and I hope they continue to do good work. I just don't trust that they're going to do good work with Vicky Hartzler at the helm. All right, what else we got? Excuse us while we pretend to be an authority on religious freedom, right? Like, that's what those people are doing. It's all pretend to them. This is just a game for them. The USA is no longer the shining city on the hill. We are not. Like, I'm sure if you talk to people from other countries, they just, if you tell them, oh yeah, I'm an American, they just look at you with sad eyes. They're like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like, that's the right answer. That is what we need. We just need like a hug, a pat on the back. I didn't do it. By the way, unrelated to this, I hope you're all going to a protest somewhere this Saturday, if you are able to, for the No Kings Day, because it'll be a huge day of protests. I'm excited. I'm going to go in my neck of the woods. Thank you. Thank you. Am I going? Yes, I'm planning to go to one probably in Naperville, the western suburbs of Chicago, where I'm from. But there's so many. Go to the website. Just type it in, No Kings Protest. You'll find the website. You could find a protest site near you. Find a good poster. Take pictures. Make a good poster. Do you hear them? Do they hear themselves? Like, they're literally describing what they want the government to do for them. Yeah, I mean, that's what Tony Perkins does. That's what Vicky Hartzler does. They think the government should be endorsing their religion and their religion only and squashing all the other ones. They don't know what religious freedom is. They think it's the freedom to be Christian, and that's it. Aren't all religious groups only supporting their own religious freedom? I disagree with that. I mean, especially if you talk to religious minorities, by and large, the ones I've interacted with, and this is also true of many Christians, I should say, yeah, they believe whatever it is they believe, but by and large, they're like, when it comes to the government, we don't want the government to take sides. We want them to treat us equally. We don't want one religion treated better than another religion. We don't want religion treated better than no religion. And a lot of minority groups who have seen what happens when the government promotes hard right Christianity, by and large, they will tell you that.